Quilts always bring happy memories to my mind. I think of watching the women in my family as they made even, straight stitches using tiny needles. Family and friendship bonds were strengthened through their times together, just as their stitches strengthened the finished quilts. Wouldn't they be amazed by the ways that sewing technology has made it possible for us to finish quilts quickly by machine? And can you imagine they're watching our embroidery machines stitching such beautiful designs that might have taken weeks and months to complete? I am so thankful for our sewing and quilting heritage. Let's make even more memories that we can pass on to future generations. Welcome to my sewing room. I am so pleased to have as my guest today Kay Brooks. Kay is Head of Product Development and Education for Floriani Stabilizer. Kay, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
You brought so many pretty things.
Yes, we brought lots of beautiful embroidered quilts, which we have lots here to show. And my focus today is I want to show you how to get good embroidery, even over dense embroidery, to lay in quilt cotton. And a lot of times we experience puckers, things like that in the finished quilt. And so today we're going to solve all those problems.
Oh, right.
Yes, definitely. Now, this quilt that you're holding here is actually done with these gorgeous little bunny rabbits, and they are quite heavy actually in the density in the embroidery. And what happens is the density of the embroidery, it tries to pull in the fabric, and that's what causes puckers. So first and foremost, before we add the batting, before we do anything, we're going to learn how to stabilize for these kinds of fabrics. And so I do recommend pre-washing your quilt fabrics. That's always a big question, if I should or if I shouldn't. I do recommend that because they're generally 100% cotton. So do try to pre-wash your fabric, and don't use fabric softener or dryer sheets within that. So what I brought today was a fusible tearaway. Now, whenever you're working on quilt cotton, and I like to show this, they do stretch.
I know.
You can see that they do stretch, and so when you add the factor of embroidery in there, they're gonna push and pull. So we're gonna stop the stretch first, and you do that by using a fusible stabilizer. This is a really nice fusible solid 1.5 ounce tearaway, and I've just simply ironed that onto the back of the fabric. Now it's also very easy to hoop. One of the problems that I see a lot in embroidery is people have a tendency to over hoop. So they're been taught to get their fabric nice and tight in the hoop, but then they stretch it. So this is going to help you, and it's going to keep you from stretching that fabric out of shape.
All right.
Okay, really, really fantastic. Now, that's for your normal embroideries. If for some reason you're working with a very dense embroidery, an overly high stitch count, we're going to do one more step. What I like to teach people is to prep the material for the embroidery. Now this is just a 6-way stretch interfacing, very, very light, very drapey, very soft. It's a 6-way stretch, it's a V stretch. This will not change the drape of your quilt cotton, but you're going to iron this in first to prep the material. It's not a stabilizer, but this is going to allow you to pile in a lot more stitches into your fabric. And again, no puckers. That's our overall goal. And another little tidbit, I always use topping over even my quilt cottons when I do embroidery. So even though quilt cotton's very smooth, a topping's fantastic.
Is that a wash away topping?
Either a wash away, or you can touch it with your iron and it goes away. Just some sort of topping to keep those stitches elevated and keep them from sinking down inside the fibers of the material. Now, once we have our fabric stabilized and we've got our gorgeous, beautiful embroidery done, then we have to, of course, choose a batting to use. Now, embroidered quilts, which again we have shown this gorgeous quilt behind Martha here. This is a quilt made by Jeannie Haskins for us. And whenever we're adding that amount of embroidery, we run into problems in quilting the quilt. Do we want to quilt through our embroidery designs? No, not normally. Okay. So what I like to use is a fusible quilt batting in my embroidered quilts, and this is so nice because you can iron this quilt batting into the back of your, or behind your top, and it's going to keep things from shifting and moving. But when you go to quilt the quilt, you don't have to quilt your standard 2 inches apart. You can protect your embroidery design and quilt around them instead of through them. So we don't want our quilt batting to fall apart whenever we wash it. So this eliminates that problem. When you iron your quilt batting in, this is a fusible fleece, you prevent having to quilt so close together. And this is an example of just a crazy patch type quilt here. And you can see I've got lots of little embroidery designs. And so by using the fusible quilt batting behind there, that prevents me from having to quilt through all of my designs to hold the batting together when it's laundered.
Okay, that's a wonderful idea.
It is, and it's a lot less fuss, a lot less pinning, and I like that.
Yes, sir.
Placement of your design on your quilt is also very, very important. And I'm actually going to pull this little piece right back up here real quick to show. This is a printable sticky template material, and really, really nice because you can print your embroidery design right off with your crosshairs, and you can see the fabric behind, and we can place the embroidery design where we want it and use that as a guide to hoop. So definitely invest in the time to print off your templates for placing your design on your quilt. Now, appliqued quilts. And this gorgeous sunflower quilt that Martha's holding up here for me, this is a sample of applique, and the edges are actually turned under. Okay, so that can be challenging in itself, is making those edges stay under. And this technique that I want to show here, this is just a block that we've pulled out, and you can see the edges are turned under, and it is machine done. However, this is a fantastic technique for hand. Uh-oh, dropped a piece there. So I'm sure that happens on the set more often than not. So here we go. All right, so the pieces I have here real quickly, this is a very simple technique, but so nice, again, for hand or machine applique. You're going to trace your design image onto this product, which is a nylon mesh, and it's fusible.
Okay.
So we're going to use a nylon mesh, trace your image, then you're going to put the right side of the mesh to the right side of the material. And we're going to stitch using a short stitch length, and then we're going to just trim that away, about down to 1/8 of an inch. Then we're going to cut a pocket and turn the mesh, and when you turn it, now the fusible side is facing the wrong side of the material. You press it, and now you have this wonderful sealed edge that's very durable, very easy to work with, very, very nice for hand quilting or machine quilting. So you would just put that right on your quilt and stitch away. Now, wanted to do also machine quilting, or machine applique, I should say. This is a sample of a machine applique design. Very, very easy to do, but I want to give you a quick technique here. This is a printable applique material, webbing, and it is sticky on one side and fusible on the other. Very, very easy to work with. You're going to run that through your printer and print off the design, fuse it to the wrong side of the material here, and then your machine actually stitches out the placement guide. You're just going to peel back, and I got it started here. You're just going to peel back the piece, and this wonderful, wonderful sticky side lets me just stick it right down.
Oh,
and now
my goodness.
We're going to hoop that, put it on the machine, and let the machine do the rest of the work for us. And you've got this gorgeous, gorgeous machine applique.
Absolutely fascinating, Kay.
So a really great shortcut.
Oh, and we love the shortcuts.
Yes,
and thank you
definitely.
so much for being
Thanks for
here with
having
me
me
today. And next, Kay has some so quick and so easy ideas for you. Kay, it is so wonderful to have you here as the Product Development and Education Specialist from Floriani Stabilizers. What do you have for us?
Well, thank you so much for having me, first of all, once again. One of the things that I find challenging sometimes is getting a design into a fabric and making it lay in the fabric correctly. There are embroidery designs out there that actually They just don't work with the fabric that we want to put them in.
Okay.
They may be too heavy. They may be just not digitized to where they work well with the fabric. So what I want to share with you today is how to make that happen for you.
I like that idea.
Yes, and two, it's a really nice, easy shortcut. This is an example. These little butterflies are one of my favorite design cards, but they are rather dense. And what I've done here is just taken the work out of it. I've embroidered them by themselves and then appliqued them onto the material. Okay. And also, if it could be an afterthought. You may have your garment or your quilt or whatever already done and then go, I wish I would have put this there, or I wish I would have put that there. Well, now you can. I'm going to show you how to do that.
Okay.
So we're going to set these little guys over here to the side. You're going to need a few things here. What we're going to need is a stencil burner, and stencil burners come in all shapes and sizes. I really love this nice, I'm going to lay this down here so the camera can get it there, a really nice sharp point, and this gets very, very hot, so you want to have a surface to burn on, like a piece of glass or a tile or a mirror, anything like that hard that you can burn on. The next thing you're going to need is what we're going to stitch on, and that is a nylon mesh. And I prefer that you use the non-fusible version. We have a non-fusible and a fusible. We want you to use the non-fusible. And we're going to hoop in our embroidery frame a couple of layers. Now here's the trick. What I want to show you is that these layers are crossed at different angles.
Okay.
One layer, it comes off the roll at a 90-degree angle.
Okay.
Normal, just fine. The second layer, the trick is to do it at a 45-degree.
Very interesting.
Okay, not another 90, we want 45 degrees. That crosses this embossing pattern, which adds an amazing amount of strength for you to embroider directly onto. So what you're going to do is just stitch out like normal. You're going to lay this on your tile, your glass, any kind of heat-resistant surface, and then you're going to take your stencil burner and just simply burn right around the edge to create your freestanding design.
And then you just straight stitch applique it on?
Just straight stitch it on. I prefer to use a non-toxic glue stick. You can use an applique product, some sort of fusible webbing, anything that you want to do, but just a little dollop of glue right there on the back. You can stick that down to hold it in place, and then just a little straight stitch around the outside is all you need to hold it in place for very quick.
Well, and very perfect, because you didn't have to go through all the steps to keep all the stitches from diving into the fabric.
No puckers, no pulls, and this is also fantastic for getting embroideries in hard to reach areas. If you're just really frustrated with how to get a design on a backpack or something, this is it. This is how you do it.
Absolutely. Kay, thank you so much for being here. I've just loved having you in my sewing room today.
Thank you.
And next we have a sewing inspiration to share with you. I'm so pleased to have as my guest today Amelia Johanson. Amelia is Associate Editor of Sew Beautiful magazine. Amelia, welcome to the show.
Hi, how are you? It's good to be here.
Oh, this adorable little blessing suit.
Thank you. It's special to me because it was made for my great nephew, Aaron, who was blessed in the wintertime. And I live in a cooler climate, so I wanted an heirloom feeling because that's what I love to sew, but it needed to be warm and suited to the climate. And so I chose a velveteen, well, that's actually a rayon velvet, excuse me.
Velvet. Oh,
and a
it's so
dupioni,
precious.
teamed with a smocked dupioni. And one of the things that I did learn, pleating dupioni is a nightmare. So to make it very easy, I backed it with a, I have to say this right, fusible permanent knit stabilizer before I ran it through the pleater. And that makes it a perfect weight. It doesn't change the fabric, but it makes it beautiful to smock on and to run through a pleater.
What a wonderful tip.
And I also made, after I made the little suit, which I just loved, I decided to make a sister dress complimentary. So we will have these in an upcoming issue of a magazine, and we wanted an option for the boy and the girl. And this one is a little bit darker dupioni, and it is on a gorgeous weight corduroy. Just really nice to sew with. So again, it's suitable to a climate, a cooler climate, but heirloom in feeling. The important thing is the yoke, which we have put onto smocking, and that's what I want to show you today. Really easy technique, looks much fancier than it is to actually produce. You cut out the yoke here, your shape of your yoke. This happens to be a diamond, it can be a curve, it can be a wavy, whatever you feel. I like the diamond, and of course it leaves a nice place for embroidery if you want to hand or machine embroidery. You're going to need to pipe that yoke and set that aside. You use basically your bodice pattern to get the proper size of the yoke. You've got your pleated fabric here. You're going to draw it up to the size to fit your yoke. Put in your armholes here, curves, and draw that up. This is completely smocked. For demonstration purposes, we did not smock it, but you're going to have this completely smocked at this point. Then you're going to go back and take your yoke piece that you created, just simply mark the center, put it on top of your yoke, and then you need that wonderful, I think someone was calling it a ice skating foot, which is a guide edge foot.
Ice skating foot, the edge joining foot.
Yeah, and once you have it positioned properly, you just run that edge joining foot down the seam between the seam of your piping, and it just attaches it to the smocked piece. You got your underarm or armholes here. On the back side, then you just trim away your extra smocking piece. This you can even, if you keep it, if it's big enough size, you can even make booties or something out of the extra smocking. Your seam allowance will be hidden in the lining. Eventually you're going to line a garment like this, and so you won't see any of this raw edge. It's all captured. You have a nice shaped yoke on your garment, and it's just a really pretty look for smocking.
That is a really pretty dress, and this is a really pretty little suit. And I just really love that look of the piece that comes down.
It looks very complicated, and it's so easy
to have a machine embroidery or a hand embroidery. I just love what you did. I also love the fact that you've used some winter climate fabrics, because so many of our readers do live above the Mason-Dixon line. And even in the South, it gets cold in the winter.
And again, the corduroy it washes beautifully. You've got an heirloom.
It was butter soft too, wasn't it?
Oh, it's beautiful. Drapes, loved it.
Amelia, thank you so much for coming to be with me today. And now we have a quilt construction technique for you. I'm so happy to have Louise Baird with me today. Louise is an educational consultant for Martha Pulling Company. And Louise, I cannot wait for you to share your tricks on putting this beautiful quilt together. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Martha. Today, the main thing I want to talk about is the fact that when you are finished with all your stitching, you end up having all these blocks, and then you have to put them together and know how to put them together to begin with. So, referring to my little sheets here, these are all of the elements of the quilt, including all the blocks, the sashing, and the borders. So, to begin with, when you complete your sewing, you have each individual block. That's generally the very first thing that you have. Whenever we write instructions for our heirloom quilts, we have you make the blocks bigger than necessary, because then you need to cut the blocks to the size that it's said in the directions. So first of all, we make them bigger, then we cut them to size, to the correct size. And in this quilt, as in any quilt that you're putting your blocks together, that you do a lot of stitching on, you want to be sure that the blocks are uniform in size, or whatever the correct size. And it's so difficult sometimes to make everything exactly the same, but that's something that you really want to do when you are making your blocks. So after you cut them to size, know the exact measurement of the blocks so that you can cut the sashing strips. Here we're going to have sashing in between a couple of these and in between these blocks in this row. So after you have that correct measurement, then you cut your sashing to the correct measurement. Then you sew row 1. After you cut the sashing, you sew block 1 to block 2 with the sashing in between, and here's block 3 with the sashing in between. So you've got 2 completed rows here. For the middle block, you have the sashing at the top and bottom of the blocks. But again, because you cut it to the correct size, it's now should be the exact size that it's needed. Okay, here we have that center row where you have 2 blocks plus sashing. And these arrows indicate that you have to measure the length. Now, everybody usually has 1/4-inch seams, but not every sewing machine sews exact 1/4-inch seams. So that's why it's always a good idea to measure, especially after you've added a sashing in between the blocks. Then you cut those sashings to the correct size and you add it to the inside and outside of row 2. Again, you have to measure the width and then cut your sashing strips. So you can sew a sashing strip at the top and the bottom of row 2. And again here you have sashing at the top and the bottom of row 2, and you sew the rows together now. You do exactly the same thing for the borders. On this quilt, these borders, the side borders, were added before the top and the bottom borders. So when you start your measuring, you have to measure from the bottom of the quilt to the top of the quilt, and that's what these side border measurements are. And then when you add the top and the bottom border, you're going to have to measure the whole width, which includes these borders, because this border includes these. So measurement is really a very important thing to do whenever you're doing your quilting. Okay, and I think that's really about all I have, except, of course, after you have all of your borders and all of your blocks together, you're going to layer it with the backing in the background, the batting, and then your completed quilt top. When your measurements are correct all the time, then your quilt is more likely to be squared and not hang off kilter.
Louise, what I think I hear you saying is be extremely, extremely accurate.
Right.
And measure even after sewing.
Correct.
To see exactly where you are. Louise, I think precision is so critical.
Yes.
In many types of sewing, but I think especially in quilting,
Yes.
and when we're putting these beautiful quilts together, like this beautiful, beautiful heirloom quilt with all its wonderful heirloom techniques, which quilting is such a fun way to be able to use the heirloom techniques. Right. I happen to think these quilts are museum pieces, which are going to be hopefully housed in someone's home for many generations. Louise, thank you so much. It's always a joy to have you here in my sewing room. And now I have some antique clothing to share with you. This blouse is so beautiful, I could just not wait to share it with you. The wonderful neckline has the collar, and I say it's wonderful, actually it has these really stiff stays in it, and I'm so very grateful that we do not wear high collars with stiff stays, but it certainly was pretty. I almost call this blouse the polka dot lace blouse. Look at this beautiful piece of all over lace fabric, which was cut into a magnificent point and has the beautiful lace that comes down. Now I'm going to slip this blouse over a little bit here and show you the diamond that is the lace and the polka dot lace in the middle that is right on the shoulder. Part of the diamond is on the front, part of the diamond's on the back. Wasn't that a creative detail? Then we have mitered lace, mitered beading. Beading is what has little holes that you could run ribbon through. Mitered lace. The sleeve is absolutely magnificent on this blouse. It has a little bitty diamond right here, shaped right onto the batiste fabric, and then what I call an extended diamond or a crisscross diamond with longer pieces and then a little diamond extending below the longer pieces. Those diamonds, this is a pattern that is repeated over and over again on the blouse. There's a little bitty diamond right on the batiste, and the larger diamond, of course, with the mitered corners. The larger diamond has what I call the polka dot lace in between it. As you know, the Victorian blouses and Victorian dresses were just as beautiful on the back as they were on the front. The back has a wonderful repeat of the diamonds and the miters and the polka dot lace and the most beautiful itty bitty buttons going down the back I have ever seen. Thank you so much for joining me in my sewing room today. Won't you come back next time?